Welcome, everybody, to Archmere's three-question series, another modified interview. We're fortunate enough to have Jim Bock, Vice President and Dean of Admission at Swarthmore College. Jim, thank you very much for agreeing to join us today.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here, and I hope your families are safe and well.
Thank you. So we normally have three set questions for you, but we're going to modify these a little bit, Jim, to kind of adapt to present environment. Jim's agreed to talk more about and kind of gear these answers, and these questions are geared toward our underclassmen. How is this going to impact future recruitment, future application reviews, how our students are being impacted in terms of how they're going to find Swarthmore and find out if it's a good fit. But we've also, Jim's agreed to kind of talk a little bit about kind of some of the other struggles on college campuses, just like Archmere has struggled with things and our communities and our states have struggled. So are our colleges and universities. So Jim's going to address some of those items as well. Jim, we'll get started right away with the first question. What type of short and long-term challenges has the virus created for Swarthmore? And what are some of the conversations and topics that are coming up specifically with next year's and maybe the future recruiting classes?
Right. No, I appreciate the question. And the time this all hit and we decided to move remotely, we had just finished making admissions decisions. So we sort of stuck with the same model. But given that most of the decisions have been made, we did decide to increase the wait list a little bit because we weren't sure whether we'd actually get the letters out. We were able to get them out electronically, but we actually set up sort of an assembly line for about 4 or 5 people that were socially distanced to actually mail the admission packets out. So again, there were just challenges structurally of how do we get the decisions across the line. Again, we were able to release all decisions on time. We even had some thoughts about, well, if we're not going to be able to have students visit our campus, might we offer some swag? So we said, hey, send us your t-shirt size. Well, within a week, the t-shirts were printed, but they're still in quarantine. The factory is closed. That was going to send them to us. So it turns out our advancement office has some what we call Mott socks, which are Lucretia Mott socks. Lucretia Mott is a suffragist and a graduate from Swarthmore, and we were actually able to get those out. So we were able to send care packages, if you will, and some swag. But we've learned, and admissions deans are talking to each other, don't ask for shirt size because we're just not sure what we'll be able to produce for students at this point. And we also had to work on obviously getting our students off campus and sheltering in place those who couldn't travel. And from an admissions perspective, as we thought about should we move, say, from May 1 to a June 1, we're still 3 or 4 weeks out from May 1st. And so as of now, Swarthmore is held to May 1. Several schools have. Many have moved to June 1st, which makes all the sense in the world. I think the initial hope from NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, and all of us, is that, hey, we may move through this and then families could visit in May, but as it stands now, we're closed May 31st. So even chances are they can obviously not visit in April. They probably can't visit in May. And so we realize that the challenges are tough right now. We encourage families to be in touch with financial aid offices if they need financial aid reconsideration, because finances has obviously shifted, and we will, with those families, and many schools will. So some are just giving that extra month. We're holding to May 1 now to see how it goes, and then we'll look at the wait list as needed. One of the challenges that we face too, as we're looking forward, is if study abroad happens, right? So if students aren't able to study abroad, that could be another 60, 70 beds that we need on campus. So what is our target? So it's sort of a moving target. We just accepted transfer applications. That deadline was April 1st. We have a robust number of applications, but only a quarter of them have transcripts. And so can students even access the transcripts? So we're working with students to complete those transfer applications. And if we, hit our target, and we have to have beds for students here, another concern are international students. So even if non-US students from abroad say, yes, Jim, we'd like to accept your offer of admission, but embassies remain closed and they can't get visa appointments, then we may be down 40 students. So it's really sort of a chessboard, three-dimensional chess. Will we have study abroad? Can the international students who come get here, or even domestically, will people from California be able to travel? So we're encouraging all students and families to really think about these conversations, and particularly in terms of finances, as they think about it. We always talk about, even in non-crisis times, not a 1 year, but a 4-year commitment, in the sense that you apply for admission once, you apply for need-based aid every year. So what might this 4-year commitment look like? And again, families are always considering that, but it's even more difficult now, right? With 401ks changing and dropping, those are really tough decisions. And we can talk about, suggestions and how that translates looking ahead for juniors and seniors, or sophomores and juniors rather, in the process. But there's just a lot of moving targets. So I would say the majority of our time in the first couple of weeks was focused on getting out the admitted class, working with accepted students, creating virtual programming, virtual hangouts. We could talk about, what that looks like for students, and then shifting our focus to the future classes, which I hope we'll have time to talk about as well.
Jim, just a quick follow-up on that. So if we end up being in an environment where international students aren't permitted to travel or can't get their I-20s, or even, like you said, domestic students, and if I'm thinking about your new students coming in, I'm assuming, but I'll let you talk about those. They're probably able to defer their admission, or are you thinking about them being online students? What's the conversation about perhaps those new incoming students not being able to get to campus, and then might that impact future class sizes? Because I'm
Right.
sure you want to be as robust as possible every semester.
Yeah, we're involved in scenario planning right now. So what might it look like with a different class size if virtual or online learning continues? We are open to deferral options, either for geography, financial. Students get good opportunities. It is, we think, still an election year. And so there may be some opportunities for students to volunteer locally when it's safe, be out, or volunteer online, right? So usually during election year, you get a bump in deferral requests. Obviously, there may be more this time. So again, it's just navigating all those different factors. So it still depends. We are scenario planning for, not business as usual, but what will it look like to invite students back in the fall? What might it look like with possible virtual learning and on campus? And again, open to all opportunity, or all contingencies right now. Again, still contingency planning at this stage.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Our juniors and even some of our sophomores would have probably been on your campus right now as we are on spring break at Archmere. So they're stressed about, so juniors specifically, about lost test opportunities. And I think most of our juniors and even some of our sophomore families would have been visiting campuses, and now that's a condensed calendar. Or I'm assuming June is, if we believe June testing and visits are going to happen, we're being very optimistic. So what types of words of advice can you give our families in terms of dealing with lost testing opportunities and lack of being able to get on college campuses, what I would think of at least until midsummer, it looks like?
No, I think that's right. It's different. Recently, I heard Virginia was extended to June 10th. Our campus is right now closed through May 31st. We hope to resume in June or July, but like you said, it's too early to call that. We decisions about summer, probably mid to late April, maybe early May, just so people can plan. In terms of testing, there are no March and April dates. The next ones are June and July. I have concerns there in terms of just capacity. If the tests are able to happen, will it be safe to travel and be out? Are there online opportunities? So I think that's tentative at best at this point. And what I would say is, look, we're all in this together. So I think there's going to be a giant asterisk on, sophomore / junior year, wherever you are in the cycle, whether you're a first year, a sophomore, or a junior. In terms of seniors, what we're dealing with is like, look, we're going to honor anything that your high school comes up with, whether that's pass fail, universal pass, holding the grade at midterm. So we just want to know that you graduated in good standing, whatever that is. So I don't think admissions offers are in jeopardy, but the question is, looking forward, particularly for the juniors and sophomores that you mentioned, wow, I just lost my season. I'm head of the community service club, and we're not doing service because we're locked in, or maybe trying to find creative ways. What I would say is, seriously, take a breath, relax, do your homework. Academics still matter. we recognize we're all in this together, and your health is the most important thing. And then your academic endeavors should take priority. You've got time to read a book. Obviously, that job that you had to help support the family, you may not have now. So we realize there are financial concerns as well. But in this time, it is time to reflect. Time to go virtual. You need to get away from the computer because you're probably doing your schoolwork and trying to do your visits. So again, right now, what I can suggest are virtual visits. There's some really good drone footage out there on campuses to get sort of a 360 view of what a campus might look like. I will also say start locally and think broadly. When you are able to come out, because it's going to be expensive to visit a lot of colleges because everyone is, in a sense, lost some income, maybe at different levels. Start locally, but think broadly. Delaware has a phenomenal university. It's the smallest state school in the country, and to me, it feels like sort of a liberal arts university, if you will, and has some great options. And I would tell folks to look at vertical versus horizontal lists. And what I mean by that is people tend to apply to, maybe more selective schools, and the more selective the school is, the less likely you have a chance of getting in. And so a lot of students think, well, if I apply to a bunch of schools, chances are I'm getting into one or two of them. Well, actually, if they all admit fewer than 10%, you have a 90% chance of not getting into any of them, right? Basic stats problem. So you need schools that are aspirational, ones you feel pretty good about. And I would also say, talk to upperclassmen of those who've gone before you, reach out to other Archmere students and families and say, hey, I know this year's been disrupted, but what was the first half of the year like, right? Your first year, your sophomore year at X university, Penn State, Dell, Swarthmore, Pomona, wherever it might be. So students had those real experiences. And students, generally, the alumni are really excited to talk about their college experience. So though we're all experiencing this right now, up until January, February, March, in many places, it was sort of business as usual. So rely on those other parents and alumni in your community to just say, hey, what's it like to be an Archmere student going to X institution? Someone that may have looked at schools that you were looking at. So again, it's a way to build community, I think. Rely and reach out to one another. And look, the tests will take care of themselves. A lot of schools are coming out with test optional policies, meaning because we don't know the future, let's just wait and see. And again, I think fewer than half the students that go to college take the test by now, and then over half will take it in June or later typically. So again, there's just the unknowns, and you're not alone. So that's the other thing I would say is we're aware of this. We want to support you, and I would just say take a breather, take advantage of being with family, focus on your academics, read some good books, and also try to find ways to create community like you're doing, some of your workshops that are going online and connecting with friends online, and again, going to those virtual tours.
Thanks, Jim. So we talked about testing, we talked about visits. I think that's the obvious, the right in front of my face things that are concerning our juniors and some of our sophomores. What other challenges do you foresee? And you talked about extracurricular activities as well. But what other concerns do you have moving forward for students who are coming into their college searches and thinking about schools like Swarthmore, schools like Delaware, schools like Haverford? There seems to be, our families are probably wondering what they're not worried about right now, and
Sure.
we obviously want to keep things positive, but we also want to make sure that they're realizing some other things. So is there anything else, in your discussions at Swarthmore as an administrator or specifically within admissions, that are things that we need to think about that might be changing for
Sure.
our more recent classes coming through?
Right. No, it's a great question. And the two things that pop into my mind, because we're sort of living it right now, and it's slightly different answer to the question, but I'll give two examples. One is transfers, and one is AP and IB credit and testing. So whether you're a sophomore, junior, senior, you may be signed up for an AP test or an international baccalaureate test. Again, I'm just speaking broadly based on who may view this. But the AP has said, instead of a 3-hour test, we're going to have a 45-minute test. The IB has canceled all tests, but they're still going to create a diploma and grade work. And they have been clear about how they're going to do that. But what we don't know is what that content will look like, both for the AP and the IB, right? They're still figuring that out, and I'm sure they'll do a great job. it's one thing for an admissions office to say, hey, we'll accept your transcript for that or whatever that is. Chris, we'll work with you. We trust Archmere. We trust the validity of the data, the students. They're wonderful. They do well in college. No question there. The second question families are beginning to ask as counselors, well, if I get, a couple 4s and 5s on my APs, will I get the same credit and or standing once I arrive on campus? That's a separate question. That's more for faculty because, again, they haven't seen the content of the test. AP and IB have assured us that they're going to be just as rigorous and be equivalent to a traditional 3, 4, or 5, right? That can be used for merit awards or placement, but we just don't know. So that doesn't mean you should race away from AP or IB or not take the test, but you have some flexibility. So we're not going to penalize from an admissions standpoint those who shift their curriculum, opt out of the test. My children's local school district has a requirement that if you're in class, you take the test. They have lifted that requirement. They're allowing, refunds for students who don't want to take the AP in this modified version, and that will not harm them. And they'll make a note of that, on their school profile for colleges next year. Again, college admissions offices, I think, will work with that and understand that. What I think a lot of us don't know yet is how will faculty translate those new tests into credit and placement once on campus. So it's just something to think about, not be overly concerned because we're all in this together, right? Archmere students are going to be advantaged or disadvantaged versus others because the AP is going to be the AP, the IB is going to be the IB. We're just still learning about what that will look like and whether those credits will transfer and whether it's the same placement. I just read an article today about, will students, particularly in the hard sciences, there's a linear learning. So if you had 3/4 of the year and not really the fourth quarter, do you come in at that next level, right? And so I think that's still to be determined, something folks should be aware of, but not overly concerned about because we're all in it together again.
And you had briefly mentioned transfers as well
Oh,
as
I'm
something
sorry,
you want to
transfers.
address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you. And so I jumped straight to AP and IB, but in terms of the transfers from a student, a week after April 1, when the application was due, saying, I think I'm going to be graded on a credit, no credit system. Will Swarthmore accept that credit on the Swarthmore transcript? And again, from an admissions standpoint, we will determine admissibility, but I lifted up to the faculty and the curriculum committee said we will accept credit on a Swarthmore transcript. So that one was fast tracked. They made a decision. Again, our focus here is to get our current students up and running and successfully learning virtually and getting seniors across and getting our underclassmen, through the process. But looking ahead, we are getting these really thoughtful questions from both transfers and sophomores and juniors about, well, looking ahead, what might the requirements be? What will you accept? So I was really heartened at the fact that they're going to accept credits from other colleges and then accept them as transfer credit at Swarthmore so that they're not losing a semester, right? Or that they're falling behind. But if they apply as a sophomore or a junior transfer, they will enter as a sophomore or a junior transfer, assuming they get credit for all their classes.
Great. So, Jimmy, you've been very generous. We call this the 3-question series, and I know we've asked many more than 3 questions. But I wanted to give you also a chance to talk specifically about Swarthmore, so kind of our bonus question here. I know you've talked about virtual visits and drone cameras and seeing Swarthmore in that light. But what's something that you're going to struggle capturing online and really just is going to simply require a visit to Swarthmore to really get a true understanding of the place, an opportunity to kind of highlight something that you say, hey, if you like this online, you got to come back and see and feel this or hear about it, whatever it might be at Swarthmore.
No, I appreciate the question. And my mind goes to a million places, and I'll try to narrow it to 1 or 2, but it really is a sense of place. The fact that we are a recognized and national arboretum with over 5,000 species of trees and plants. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and it's gorgeous in every season, but particularly in the spring as the cherry blossoms are blooming. The rose garden, where seniors actually take a rose and pin it to their robes as they walk down to the amphitheater for commencement, won't be happening this year. So just getting a sense of the campus once you're on it's and every school or mission is beautiful. But not many are in an arboretum. And I mentioned that in this context of we have a train on campus. So you're 25 minutes from UPenn and 28 minutes from Center City, Philadelphia. So we love our location being suburban, but not urban and or not rural. And you also just get a sense of the vibrancy of the place and the sense of community, even though we're a residential college of about 1,500 students. So about a fifth of first generation, which you might not know just by visiting, but over 45% domestic students of color, 12% international, and people just sense not just diversity in how it looks, but the languages they hear, the people they talk to, and there's a real sense of loss. The campus is serene. It is beautiful right now, but it is empty. And we miss our students, we miss our colleagues, we miss the staff, we miss our visitors. It was pretty amazing. I hadn't looked, I look at numbers every year. I mean, that's what we do, right? We're admissions folks. But from March to mid-April, we had to cancel over 4,000 visitations. I mean, that's a significant number. Folks that were groups, parents, families, individuals that were going to set foot on our campus in about a 5-week period. And what we call the amoeba tour, walking around and checking everything out. So we just miss them, and we can't wait to welcome them back. And again, I appreciate the time you give me today to share with families.
Jim, thank you very much for your time. I know our families are going to want to get on your campus as soon as they possibly can, and you're a wonderful resource for me as well as for Archmere. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, Chris, appreciate it, and well to all your families. Take care.